Hello, myself Sunil Ramakrishnan. Basically, I am a software delivery head working as a software delivery head. So basically, today we are going to talk about project cost, project expense, part two. Basically, part one we have already discussed, and in part one, basically, what we have discussed, I will just tell in summary. Uh, there was one example taken, $2,000 was is the project cost, and the what $2,000 contains long term expense, short term expense, and we have taken few example of the expense that basically is a precedent expense contains in the long term plan, and few dollars are calculated in the expense also. So basically whatever expense that was containing, that was basically going to take as a long term expense. So basically there are hundreds of project that contains that expense. So basically in part two, basically we are going to talk about few more examples of the expenses and few more parameters of the of the project expenses, that are basically, we can say, we can divide this expenses in long term and short term. Basically, what is long term expense and what is short term expense? Basically, first we will going to discuss about the long term expense. Long term expense, basically we have already told, that is basically that one example I have taken, and that basically can be divided into uh, per project. We can divide that long term expense to $3. So basically 2000 is the project expense. In that basically expenses, long term expense also contains, that is basically $3 we can take as a precedent expense was basically there. In that basically we can take as a $3, and or basically if it's a long term basically, then we can take as a $2 also. And this is basically per project expense. And this basically, if there are 1 lakh project, then you can imagine how many dollar it comes. So it's more than 2 to 3 lakh dollar. So basically, like this basically all the expenses are getting covered up. So basically I'm either this basically I want to say that whatever expense is connected with the software industries, that basically are covered through the project cost. This only I just want to tell. So basically whatever the parameters are taken, whatever the expense are taken, that all are covered in the project cost. So basically this basically it's a duties of chartered accountants, costing departments. They basically take care of this. But basically we should know, basically, because if you are into software industry, then you should know how the project cost are getting calculated. Because so you should know basically how the project cost is getting calculated, how the project expense are getting calculated. Now basically we will see a few more things here. That is basically, in this expense basically we will divide this expense into two expense. That is this long term expense, we can divide this into two expense basically. One is fixed expenses, um, and fixed expenses is basically, you can say, fixed expenses and variance expense. Basically fixed expenses basically you can say, for in $2,000 basically, if you are paying to if a client is telling that, yeah, we will be paying $2,000 for this project. So basically in this $2,000, what is the server cost and what is the database cost? So this can't be different. This can't be a variance expense. Basically variance means it can't be different expense in all the project or for all the clients. This is a fixed expense. Basically fixed expense means fixed amount is going to be paid by the customer. So in this fixed expense, that long term expense basically, which we have taken as an example of $2 to $3 has to be adjusted. So in that basically, in this $2,000, this server expense, in this server expense you can adjust this $2. That is basically that example I have taken. In long term expense, whatever plan basically of the long term expense, where you can adjust the amount. So the adjustment of amount basically, th- in software industry they adjust do the adjustment in this server expense. Basically in server expense basically it's a fixed expense. Basically you can, so fixed expense means the expense is calculated by the set of groups, set of industry, set of groups. Set of groups contains chartered accountant group, costing groups, who calculates the server, who calculates the fixed server of expenses. And server can be of any company. HP is there, Microsoft is there, and many companies are there. Basically IBM is there. So they basically calculates the fixed expense. In that fixed expense basically they add this, they are adding this amount basically. But it's a fixed expense. So fixed expense means all company has to pay this amount. So it's a server expense. So basically, if you are deploying any project into the server, then you have to pay the server expense basically. It's a database expense, database expense basically. So two expenses are the server and database expense. So this is basically fixed for the all. And in other side, basically in $2,000, where the amount are getting adjusted. One basically expenses means the client is paying $2,000. So how this 2000 is getting calculated? So first basically we also saw long term. Just now saw the long term expense. In long term expense basically we had divided this expense to two. One is fixed expense and another is variance expense. And the variance expense basically contains salaries there of the employees. Salaries are there, then the company expenses are there. Company whatever do the expense, company travels to the for the clients, company do the lots of expenses in the companies, they pay the bonus. So where basically they are going to do the adjustment basically. So in projects only, the company says that we only have one income, that is project. So from project only we can able to adjust the amount. There is no other expense. There is no other income which software industry gets. That is only one project. So through project only we are getting each and every income basically. So we can do the adjustment in this project expense only. So whatever client basically amount they are paying, in that amount basically, we can adjust, we have to adjust our expense also. Otherwise, why to run the company basically? If we are running the company, that means we are running the company for profit only. We are not running the, we don't need to run the company for loss. If we are getting any loss, then there is no need to run the company basically. So company has to be keep going. For that basically you have to, your company has to be in profit only. So $2,000 basically you have to take as a project expense. And in this $2,000, how basically the expenses are getting calculated, that basically we have saw just here. So basically project company says that we only have the project expense. So we have saw here long term expense, short term expense, and in this basically fixed expenses, how fixed expenses are there, and how variance expenses are there. Basically how variance expenses are calculated, are getting adjusted in this $2,000, and how basically fixed expense basically are getting adjusted in this $2,000. So this was a little bit about, more about the expenses of the project, or expenses of the project which a client has to pay. Client is paying the amount, and how basically software industry is telling that how software basically do the adjustment of the their expense basically. Because company says that if we are running any software company, that basically we are running for profit only. We are not going to run the company if we are getting the loss amount. If we are getting any loss, then basically there is no need of running the company. So to run the company we have to get the profit. And profit pro software company can take from this project expense also. There is no other income only. Project software company people says that there is no other income. According to that only chartered accountant industry and costing industry have created the entire plan for the software industry, that they have to adjust their expenses everything in this project cost only. So this is the only income, that's why. So basically, this was about the little bit about the project expense, which basically is calculated by the chartered accountant industry and costing industry. And basically, this is Sunil R. Nair basically signing off for just now. This is basically a second part of the project expense, project cost. Basically, next video, basically, that would be part three video. In that, basically, we are going to see little bit more detail about the project expense and project cost. Thank you for now.